Hi there, and welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hey folks, welcome to this week's episode of the podcast, and I'm delighted to have you along. Again, going out on a Thursday, moved it from Friday a couple of weeks ago back to Thursday, just give that extra day before the weekend hits, and maybe you can get a chance to listen to it on the Thursday or the Friday. So effectively Thursday is the new Friday, and we will go with that for the next while. So in this week's intro, I just want to touch on Martin Brennan's episode. Again, as I always say, encourage you to go back and check it out after this episode if you haven't listened to Martin already. He is a very inspiring and knowledgeable man with years of experience in the areas of development and coaching. I took a lot out of it, some really good tips and takeaways that I've written down and will continue to draw upon. I probably got more feedback from that episode than I have for a long time in relation to just the conversation, how it went, and that was really cool. And it was nice to hear people enjoyed it. And all sorts of feedback that comes back that helps me grow and develop. It's not all good by any means, but it's constructive, and that is important too. And I take it on board and hopefully can implement it as we go, and I appreciate it. Just a couple of other updates. My 1 Minute Monday idea concept is into its 6th 1 Minute Monday, and this week I had BB Baskin on, who is a very well-known TV personality, radio, hotelier, now a motivational speaker from Ireland, and she gave the 1 minute tip this week. Very well received. She has a big following on Twitter, and I was delighted to have her on. So that went down well, and hopefully I will have more guest contributors in the future. I do have a number of 1 minute tips that I want to share over the next number of weeks, so I'll mix and switch and change that up as we go, but it is enjoyable, so check it out. It's on the website, on the video link. Go to that. Love if you did. Last week I did put a call out around a solo show that I hope to do, where I'm answering a bunch of questions that come in from guests or listeners, mainly listeners, not just guests. I am collating those. I have a few in already, and I will absolutely do that in another couple of weeks. So if you have a question in mind, pause right now, write it down, email it to me, send it on Twitter or any of the other socials, and I'd be delighted to answer it. It can be anything technical, related to the podcast, things I've learned, whatever. I just want to share that if you're interested. If not, that's cool too, but I will put it out. One other thing I started to do is release the episode a few days earlier on the Patreon page, where you can go and listen to this episode without the intro. Some people might want that, and get that a few days earlier. And I hope to start doing more and more of that, and adding more content as well. I have a lot of episodes recorded, and it's only fair that I get them out in a sequence to the people that I recorded them to. But hopefully I'll be adding some more conversations that I have maybe just on Patreon over the next while. So check that out. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Okay, on to this week's episode, and it is with Madeleine Black. So Madeleine connected with me just after the Josh Quigley episode, actually about a month or so back. She had been videoed for promotion, I think, around her book that we talk about, Unbroken, or maybe before that, and Josh had recorded a video with the same producer. So there was a connection there, and we started to talk about her story. And I quickly realised that this would be a story that would be more than worth sharing on the podcast, because it is a very important area to discuss, and something that I think from Madeleine's experience of sharing her story has helped many people. So again, the goal here is to help others that may have had some challenges or adversity in their own lives. So Madeleine released her debut book, Unbroken, just last year, and in it she talks about a gang rape that she endured back in the late 70s. She was only 13 years at the time, and for years and years afterwards this obviously had a huge impact on her self-esteem, her outlook on life. Everything was impacted as a result, and she tried to bury those memories. The story is certainly about suffering, pain and trauma, but also, as you'll hear, it's about compassion, forgiveness, healing, recovery, and hope. It's certainly a very important episode, and one I was very keen to share. And again, all I can say is I appreciate Madeleine's time to come onto the show and go through her story with me and now with you guys. So there's more details of this episode on the show notes. There's some book recommendations that we talk about as well towards the end. And obviously we have a link to Madeleine's book as well as other ways to get in touch with her. So that's pretty much the intro, guys. This is a very important episode, as I said. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you take something positive from it. And I shall hand it over to Madeleine Black. Thank you and enjoy. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the 1% Better podcast, and this one is with Madeleine Black. Madeleine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and tell your story. We were connected as a result, I guess, of the episode I had released just a couple of weeks ago. I suppose when I'm releasing this, it'll be a while ago, with Josh Quigley. He is somebody I suppose you're aware of yourself.
Yeah, we've actually both been filmed by a filmmaker that I know called Kathleen Little. So she filmed a little film of Josh and she's made one of me as well. So we have connected, but we've never really met, but we know of each other.
The Josh episode was great in that a lot of new people have connected with me as a result of sharing his story, and that's really positive in that I love meeting and talking to new people, new potential guests, and I suppose that's where we're at right now. I'm really interested in hearing your story. I know about a year ago, roughly around a year ago, you released a book called Unbroken, One Woman's Journey to Rebuild a Life Shattered by Violence. Maybe just even in a nutshell talk a little bit about what the last year has been like since you released the book.
It's been a very busy year, actually. Doors have opened in ways that I never really thought, would happen. I first shared my story about 3.5 years ago, and I've just become, I suppose, an accidental activist or an accidental public speaker. Never really planned to do all the talks and everything that I am doing now.
Yeah, so it's been a busy year, and I know at the point of recording this you're going to be in Cork to do another speech and a radio show and potentially be in the paper as well. So I guess it's key to talk about the book, and we can certainly go into the details there. In the episodes, I normally like to bring it right back into the guest's journey, and one of the first things, even before we talk maybe about the event that transpired, what was life like for you growing up? Earliest memories? Were you a happy-go-lucky kid? Just to get a bit of perspective of what you were like before that.
I guess I was a normal kind of child. I'm one of 5. I'm in the middle. I was quite shy, quite naive, quiet, just normal. My mum wasn't well for a few years, so she was bedridden for a couple of years. But, normal kind of busy family life.
Right, normal busy family. Do you have any kind of early memories? Is there anything that stands out when you were growing up that sticks with you?
Yeah, we always had animals. My mum loves animals, and so there were 5 kids and 5 dogs. And she went on many years later to have an animal sanctuary. So we always had guinea pigs, gerbils, mice, rabbits, everything. We had all sorts.
You were in a good place.
Yeah, there was the element of concern. My mum wasn't too well, but apart from that, it was okay. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So the story, I suppose, begins in the book in London in the late 70s. When the event happened, conscious of even not sure what to call it, what to talk about it, but I guess maybe if you want to take it over and maybe talk us through the story.
So I'm okay to name it. It's fine with me. So my story starts in the late 1970s when I was gang raped by 2 American teenagers and I was 13 years old.
Okay. The events that happened around that day, if you want to talk through that, and maybe just for the listeners who mightn't have much of a perspective on it, if you could go through that.
Sure. So it happened very easily. A girlfriend and I decided to come up with a plan to have a night out, and we decided to buy some alcohol, go and meet some boys. I don't know how we convinced the off-licence that we were old enough, but we managed to buy vodka, which we drank in a local cafe mixed with orange juice under our table. And I got very drunk very quickly. I'd never drunk before. And these 2 young men took us back to her mum's empty flat, which is not where we were meant to be staying. We lied about where we were staying. And it became very clear very early on that they weren't there to put me to bed and let me sleep off the drink, that they were there for something else. And when I started to fight back, the violence just escalated. Right.
Yeah, like it's a shocking situation to be in. And when I suppose read through some of the articles that came out around the time of the book, you mentioned during the event that you became aware of a young Tibetan monk, a kind of an image of that. Can you talk through how all that came about?
Well, I don't really know how to explain the presence of the monk. This is only my understanding. I think it's because I came so close to being killed, because they really made about 3 attempts to kill me that night, that I was just taken to another dimension in life. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone listening, but I think I was really shown maybe what goes on that we don't normally see. I was obviously very protected by whoever appeared by my side, but I didn't actually remember him from the night. It was many, many years later, because I cut off so many memories and feelings and emotions. But when my oldest daughter turned 13, all my memories came flooding back in the forms of nightmares and flashbacks and pictures. And then I also started to see this young monk, and I thought, I really am going mad now. But the more I denied all of the memories, they would come back faster, and the more I denied his presence, he would appear to me as well. So I had to find a way to accept both. If I didn't accept him, I had to accept all the details. I had to accept all of it as how it happened. So yeah, it might not make sense to most people, but it doesn't really make that much sense to me as well, why he appeared by my side.
And in the reflection you've done on it, has anything else come to you as to why it was a Tibetan monk? Was there anything in your subconscious even at that time or subsequently that ties to Buddhism? Is there an interest in that area, or is it just completely unexplained?
Unexplained.
Okay.
I mean, I have studied psychotherapy, and it is based on a lot of Buddhist teaching, but at that time in my life, at 13, no, I wouldn't really known about Buddhist monks. It wouldn't have been part of my consciousness at all.
It's interesting, the image or the symbolism that came up. Was there something in there that you weren't aware of, but maybe, as you said, there's higher powers. At the time or even subsequently, have you been spiritual or religious, or is there anything connected to anything in that area?
I'm not really religious. I'm really practice it in a big way, and spiritual, I don't really know what spiritual means. I'd rather just live my life. I don't really believe in spirituality. I just want to be the best kind of human being that I can be. So I think I believe more in humanity than spirituality.
Okay.
Being the best version of me that I can be.
Okay, very good. I can hear the dog barking in the background there. That's okay.
Sorry, he appears in quite a few podcasts that I do.
He's a popular dog. No, that's fine.
He is.
So maybe just after the event then that happened, it was something that you and your friend completely blocked out. You kind of parked it. Was that something you both agreed to say, we can't talk about this at all? Was it just a natural
I don't
instinct?
really even remember making that agreement, but maybe it was just a known thing between us with no words that we weren't going to speak about it, because from my point of view, I can't answer for her. I just thought, well, we lied about where we were staying. I was meant to be at her grandma's and not her mum's empty flat. Her mum was away. I'd also been drinking, and I just thought I would get into trouble. And I had blocked off so many of the memories that it was really hard for me to remember all the details then. But I know now what we don't speak about, it really leaks out of us, and it leaked out of me in many, many different ways. Yeah,
and as I said, you were only at the age of 13, and I know from reading you've gone down the route of doing therapy and psychotherapy in your own life. You were probably only very much forming your own value set and views of the world at that time. You decided to block that out, or I don't know if it was a decision.
Yeah, I don't think it was even a conscious thing. I think it was just the trauma is too much for us, so we just shut it out. We're able to shut that part of us down.
And then in the weeks and months and years directly afterwards, how did that impact how you lived, I guess? How did that manifest for you afterwards?
Well, I can see now that I was just doing anything I could to numb out. So I became anorexic. So it was easier to focus on what I wasn't eating than to focus on what was going on inside. I turned to drugs. I used alcohol. I had many fears, many phobias. My opinion of myself was so low. I just thought I was worthless, dirty, contaminated. I attempted suicide. I ended up in a children's psychiatric ward for 8 weeks. So yeah, it manifested in many different ways. And really it was my my mindset. I just really didn't see the point of being alive. I didn't understand the point of myself.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazily tough. When you said you were in psychiatric wards for 8 weeks there, I know at this point you hadn't told your parents of what had happened. I think you were too scared of admitting it, and probably because of not only just admitting it and seeing their reaction, but in case, I think you said, in case the Americans that did the crimes would have come back and looked for you, you were petrified of that.
Yeah, because one of the last things they said to me as they held the knife against my throat was if I tell anyone that they would kill me. And I believed them, after what they were capable of doing. I believed that they could do that to me.
What did your parents think was wrong when you took the overdose and for those 8 weeks?
Think as I said in the start, my mum was unwell, and I had already been in hospital when I was 11 because I had epilepsy, and they think it was brought on by the stress of her being unwell. So they just thought I maybe wasn't coping with that. And when I went back into hospital, we met with the same psychologist that I met when I was 11 years old, and he just carried on where he left off. And I just think now it was lazy medicine. He just made assumptions that it was the same issue. And interestingly, when I wrote my book, I applied for my hospital notes because I really wanted to see if they had any idea of the trauma of what was going on, because nobody ever asked me the question in hospital, what had happened to you, and they had no idea in my notes. So they just thought it was down to my mother's ill health, and they were worried about my depression and my anorexia, but they never really got down to what was behind it.
But it was for you, it was very clear though, was it, or were you even burying that?
Well, yeah, I think then that stage I was burying it. I kind of knew, but I didn't really name it as what I thought it was. And yeah, it's amazing how we can numb out and deny things. The power of denial is so strong. And also that the shame is so hard. I thought if people knew that they would feel the same way about me that I felt, that they would be disgusted, as if, in some way it was a reflection of me, and I couldn't. It's shame is so hard to walk through. It's just crippling. Yeah.
No, shame. And I suppose that becomes, it's like a lot of things, the more you let it build up in your mind, the bigger and bigger it becomes. And obviously This is a huge incident, and the shame piece, even though when you maybe sit objectively and hear somebody else talking about it on TV or hear something similar happen, you would feel so sorry for them, as opposed to being, the shame piece wouldn't come up. So that's so tough. The part then you mentioned at 16, you left a note on your pillow as you went to school. That's how your mum found out. I suppose the approach you took there, was that planful, or just was it came to a head, or what? I'd love to hear a bit about that.
Yeah, I think at that stage my behaviour was really rebellious. They would say stay in, so I would go out, and don't drink, so I would drink. All the things that looked like I was just a rebellious teenager. And I stayed out all one night. My mum told me not to stay out, and when I came in the morning, she said, "Don't you know what could happen to you?" So inside my head, I'm shouting the words, but I couldn't find my actual voice. So I just left this note on my pillow. And when I came home, they questioned me about it, and they called the other girl involved. And she said, "No, I've got it wrong. They wouldn't have done that. They were nice boys. They were sons of diplomats. They just took us home, and that was it." And I just thought, gosh, it took me all that time to find my voice. And then I just felt I wasn't believed. And that just sent me off into a deeper downward spiral, I have to say.
God. Yeah, so even at that, after that, your friend came back and said that it wasn't that at all. Was it then something that your parents just kind of told you to forget about, that didn't happen, or did the dialogue continue?
No, my dad did want to go to the police, and my mum was insisting that we couldn't go to the police, and my mum was very quiet, and it took me many, many years to understand her silence. I discovered later that she had also been raped as a neighbour. And my father never knew. They had 5 children. I don't know how she ever got on with her life with no support, no counselling, nothing. And they discovered that this man was also raping his daughters. So he was charged. He went to prison. And my grandparents, they moved while he was in prison, and they never spoke about it again. So when I was talking about what was happening to me, it obviously you can understand now, it was bringing up all my mum's trauma. And because my dad didn't know, it was shame that silenced her. She couldn't find her voice to say, if she goes to the police, that they will examine her, or this is what happened to her. I know now that they wouldn't have examined me because it was 3 years later, but it brought up a lot of fear for her when I was saying what had happened.
Oh, that's a coincidence of crazy proportions, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, it's not really a coincidence, because I know that my story is the story of many women and many men. Sadly, it's common. It's not unusual what has happened to me. Yes, maybe to the level of violence, but rape, stranger date rape is unusual. Most women or men will know they're rapists. A lot of it happens within marriages, within dates. It's a common global issue.
Just to move it forward a little bit, you were 17 and then you decided, or your parents decided, that it was an opportunity for you to travel or to move away, to maybe get away from your environment?
Yeah, to get away from all the bad influences, because they discovered that I was smoking a lot of dope, and they called all my friends' parents and told all of them, which obviously didn't go down too well. Right. And by that point, none of my friends were really speaking to me because they all got into trouble. So I just thought, what have I got to lose? I'll go away. So I went to Israel for a year, and I worked on the kibbutz for 6 months, and then I worked in a town called Ashkelon as well for 6 months.
Right. And it was there where you met your now husband?
It is, yes. I met him 35 years ago when I was 17.
Love at first sight, I would imagine.
Well,
so.
yeah. I didn't know then, but I did feel that I could trust him, and I felt safe with him, because I hadn't felt that with many people at all.
Right. And did you confide in him early on about what had happened? When did he become... Yeah. Not
instantly, I don't think, but it was when I realised it was becoming serious, and then we talked about marriage, and I had to say to him, look, I would never have children. In my mind, the thought of giving birth was going to be too much like being raped again, and he was fine to start with, and every now and again he would ask me the question, and I can remember the exact moment. We were away on a beach in Thailand, because we used to save all our annual leave and travel every winter for a month or so.
Right.
And he went to ask me the question again, and I was all ready for my usual answer, but something came in, and I just thought, if I never become a mum or have children, these two young men will still be having power and control over me, and I didn't want them to have that control over my life anymore. And then I really came up with a plan that I call my best revenge, which would be that I would have children, and I would just live my life as well as I could, almost, to refuse to be defined by what had happened to me.
Okay. And at what point did you come up with that best revenge idea? How long after you met your husband? Was it a number of years later?
It was maybe like 3 years after, about 8 years after we'd met, because then it took me a couple of years to have some counselling and get my head in a good space to be able to have kids as well. Okay.
And do you see the meeting of your husband as the turning point, or was it shortly afterwards when you started to get counselling that you found that?
I think meeting him, because at that point I still felt pretty worthless and useless and pointless, and I would drive the poor man mad. I would say, what is it about me that you love? How can you possibly want to be with someone like me? And he was just very steady and grounded, and he just said, I just do. And over time, I saw with his consistency that I was lovable, and I was able to give love back in return, and that changed so much, because I was so full of hate for myself and for other people, and suspicions and paranoia and all the rest of it. So love, I think, is always going to win.
Brilliant. That's good. Lovely to hear. Obviously he helped with your confidence, your self-esteem, started to build, and the fact that you could start trusting him was probably a step forward as well. You mentioned counselling. At what point did you start going for proper counselling to kind of work through that?
Yeah, I think when we were away in Thailand, I was, determined then to become a mum. So as soon as I came back, I started to research the right person for me, and I went through a few. I have 3 children, so I've got past that fear and that phobia, and I really thought that was it. I thought I was healed and it was all done. Right.
And then, as you said, until when was it your first daughter, when she hit 13, that all of this came back?
Yes, so trauma's very interesting. It has a way of resurfacing when we least expect it. But when I look back now, there were a combination of events, and it was always going to come back. So I was doing a lot of personal development workshops, and I was studying psychotherapy, which also, challenges you personally as well. And Anna turned 13. And like I said before, all these memories, all these nightmares, all these flashbacks just came back in the day and in the night. And I would actively try not to get to sleep because I knew I would have a nightmare. So I was existing on like 1 or 2 hours sleep. So I was just a mess. And I couldn't understand, why, if it was so bad, then why didn't I remember it? And it's only now that I realize it's because it was so bad. That's why I didn't remember it. And as I said earlier, it was my denial of the memories that was actually now causing me more distress. It was like a porn film running through my head, and I didn't want to remember it. Right. But the more I denied it, the more I would get all the memories coming back. So eventually, after about 3 years of going to therapy, I had to find a way to think, you know what? They didn't kill me. I am still alive. I am okay. It's not happening anymore. And they are just pictures. But, we have to really work the memories, because the pictures, they do contain energy and they're very reactive, and I was activated all the time by watching these memories. But after a while, I could work them so much that the sting kind of left all the memories, all the energy had left, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I think I've done kind of counselling myself, and just talking to others that have, you can almost remember the memories or change them. Absolutely. Using certain techniques. Do you think your own journey of going down to do psychotherapy and kind of get into the area of therapy was a catalyst for you to kind of rework and reimagine and address a lot of
I don't know whether it would have come back anyway, but my course was based on a lot of personal development, and it was very full on, it was very challenging, it was very experiential. So yes, it was always going to come back at some point, but that definitely did trigger it.
Yeah, definitely brings it up. And do you think one of the other things I was just thinking and reflecting on before we talked is that, sometimes I ask guests, is there things you regret, or is there a thing that you could have done differently 10 years ago or whatever? I find through my own journey, everything I've done, I don't regret anything, in that I just say I wasn't ready to make a change 10 years ago that I was 5 years later, that has got me onto the right path. So I think things are happening as almost they should do. Does that kind of make sense with you in that?
I think it's all about timing. I couldn't have done the work that I did 10, 12 years ago, 20 years ago. I wouldn't have been in a steady place for it. I would have been too caught by my trauma. And it's funny how we really think we're doing okay, and it's only when we look back many years later that we think I really wasn't okay at all. And it's only now when I look back I think, gosh, I just about was holding it together. I remember going to train as a volunteer at Rape Crisis, and in the training we were doing the side effects that a woman may feel if she's been raped, and I could go through the list and I thought, oh my gosh, I've had that, and it was only then that I realised I lived with post-traumatic stress disorder for years, undiagnosed, and I had no idea why I jumped at every sound I heard, why I could burst into tears, why I was paranoid about my safety or hated the dark, my distrust of men, being out of control. All of it was linked to PTSD, and I never made that connection. Yeah,
it's eye-opening when you do then understand why, and it makes so much sense. Do you think that the journey you've gone through obviously puts you in a very strong position to be able to help others as a result, right? So would that make sense?
It does make sense. When I first shared my story, it went public on a website called the Forgiveness Project, and our founder, Marina, always refers to us as story healers rather than storytellers. And I have felt that so many times since I've shared my story, whether it's been written down in my book or on a blog, or when I'm speaking or TV, radio interviews. So many people every day, I still get messages, get in contact of how, me speaking has helped them. But it was someone else speaking that actually helped me to find my voice. And I know that since I've spoken, I've helped other people, and they will then help other people. So it is really a ripple effect.
Yeah, definitely. At what point, it was 2014 when you came to terms with the trauma, you decided to share the story publicly for the first time?
And Marina said to me, you don't need to put your photo up, you don't need to put your name. But I had recently been chatting to another woman who was going to prison to meet the man, a serial rapist who had broken into her home and raped her. And I thought, gosh, if she could do that, I can share my picture and my name. I don't want to be ashamed anymore. I don't want to hide and have this thing that's like a sordid, dirty secret. I've got nothing to be ashamed about. I realized that the shame, actually, it never belonged to me. It always belonged to the perpetrator. And for years, I'd been hanging on to this inappropriate shame. And I realized the only way for me to work my shame was to step into it. When I was hiding away, it actually just magnified it. And the more I speak out, it's shattered all of my shame. I have nothing to be ashamed about at all.
And the classic question is, how did it make you feel as you started to do it? Were you extremely nervous, scared to the point just before telling the story, and then did that flip very quickly? Was there a huge release?
The very first time when she told me it was going to go up on their website and I could share the link on Facebook, I was very hesitant pressing the send button, I have to be honest.
Yeah.
And then, because a lot of my friends maybe knew, or a lot of them maybe didn't know that it was near fatal, or other people didn't know all the details. And here I was exposing myself, and it was quite diluted what we put on the Forgiveness Project, but there were still some details. But, from day one, I've had so much support, and I've had so much love. It's been amazing, the support that I've got. And also, it's not just the support, I know what it does for other people. So amazingly, when I'm asked to speak, don't ever tell anyone that hires me, I never prepare what I'm going to say. I just really trust that the words will come, and the words have always come. I never feel nervous, because I think now it's not about me anymore. It's what it can do for other people, which is why I do share my story, because I want to break down the shame and the stigma and the silence, which I know are the hardest things to get through. But finding my voice has also been the most vital, empowering thing, powerful thing that I've ever done. And it's not only strengthening me, I know it helps other people as well.
Absolutely. And as you said, to the point of never preparing and just telling it is your truth, it is your story. And I suppose when it is that, no matter what that is, it's going to be authentic and it's going to come across genuine. So brilliant to you for doing that. As you were working through the trauma and conscious of a couple of thoughts that come up, the exercises that you used or techniques, is there any ones that stand out, and probably through your own journey in therapy and a psychotherapist, that you used that you found particularly beneficial or worked well?
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I had access to many different types of therapies. I know I'm very fortunate that I could afford to pay for a lot of them, which people might not be able to. But the talking therapy definitely helped. But I was also introduced to therapeutic massage, which is really, it's a very different type of massage. It's not a sports massage, because all the trauma is held in our cells, and I wasn't really sure. And when I went the very first time, I could hear this person screaming and shouting and kicking and crying, and I thought, oh my gosh, who's making all that noise? And then I realized it was coming from me.
God.
and I just thought it was so powerful that, one session was like 5-10 psychotherapy sessions. It just moved all that trapped trauma that's held in our body. So body work for me was really important, because on the night that it happened, I very much was aware of leaving my body. And so my journey has always been about getting back in and remembering all the memories, because I never felt that I was occupying all of my body. It felt like I had a house, but it wasn't furnished. It was like an empty space inside of me. So I've always just tried to get back in my body, whatever it would take. So I've done the therapeutic massage. I did transformational breath work, which was also getting right back into my body, but that really helped. I did drumming. I've just done so many different things. I went to sweat lodges and just loads of things to really ground me, to get me back in.
Right. Meditation, is that something that's kind of intertwined with a lot of that, or is that something?
Well, there has. I don't meditate every day, but I guess all of these things are a way to connect ourselves, and it's the disconnect that leaves us caught in our trauma. When we're really connected and grounded in, that can help us to stay steady with whatever comes our way. So it was learning to get back in and connect to myself, whatever that took.
And through that experience, that kind of picked up on it a few times. When you bottle down and bottle away these feelings and emotions and memories, they remain inside you until at some point down the road you kind of have to face them. You have to almost get them out of you or come to terms with them. Is that a
well, I chose to. I guess we never have to, but if we don't do it, then I just thought I'm just gonna keep running from this all my life. It's gonna chase me forever until I finally deal with it.
Yeah, rather than run away, run towards it and kind of embrace or face it. Is that the general consensus, or is that the general learning you've gained during the counselling? Is that it's always going to be there unless you actually face up to it, and there's no other way of getting rid of it?
Yeah, but I think for me, the way in was the way out. You know, when all the memories started to come back, I went to see a counsellor, a therapist, and I wanted him to make the memories stop. I wanted him to make them go away. I wasn't a very good client. And then I quickly realised, actually, that wasn't what was going to help. It was actually facing the memories was going to be the thing that I had to do. And that was, I have to say, one of the hardest things that I've had to do, but the most beneficial, because as I explained, it deactivated all that energy that was associated with all the pictures, you know, all the sting, all the activative parts just have now diluted.
Yeah. Okay. So the book, when did you decide that you were going to write the full story, and what was your approach around putting that together?
Well, I was advised to, in about, 2010, to write down what had happened that night by a teacher that I've been going to for many years. Right. And first of all, I thought, there's no way I can let anybody read that, let alone you or anyone else. Right. But I would stop and start it, and then one night, about 4 years after he asked me, all the words just came out in a wonder. It's like my hands were on automatic, and what I've edited is what then appears on the Forgiveness Project. Marina saw that. And then I went to see a speaker from the Forgiveness Project, a woman called Marion Partington, and most of the events were in London, and this one happened to be in Glasgow, about 2 minutes from where I live. And I went to see her speak, and I just saw the effect that she had on the room that night. And I really then again understood what Marina meant by story healers. And I just thought, I could share my story too. I could maybe write a book. She had written a book. And that night, the same thing started to happen. At nighttime, I would just see the words just going round and round my head. I couldn't get to sleep. And the next morning, I would sit down at my computer and all the words would just come out, So I really just feel like I was a typewriter. And in about 8 weeks, I had written 70,000 words.
Wow.
Yeah.
And by doing it, did you feel that it was another part of the process of healing? And
it was actually. It was very good to put it all down on paper, and I don't think I really intended it to be a book. I thought I'm just going to write it all down for me and just see, if I can just get it all out and put it all down on paper. And yeah, actually, it was very good to see it all written down. Yeah,
very, very good. And as you said, it's been a year since it's come out, and the last 12 months have been pretty hectic. Do you still have bad days? Do you still have days where you feel things are getting in on you, and if so?
No, I would say I don't.
You don't? Okay.
One of the things that happened to me in therapy when I was going, when my daughter turned 13, is something that I didn't expect. My therapist towards the end of the 3 years suggested to me that maybe these 2 young men weren't born rapists. And at first I was completely outraged by what he was saying to me, but he planted a seed in my head and it started to grow, and I really wanted to understand what had conditioned these 2 young men so much that they made that decision that night. How did they know to be so violent? What had they seen, heard, or experienced themselves? And when I really took that on board, I actually started to, surprising myself, felt compassion towards them, and I found myself forgiving them. And I never ever will forgive the act of rape because it is a total violation, but I could forgive them in their mistakes as a human being that they made that night. And I realized that in their dehumanizing of me, that they really were dehumanizing themselves. And how connected were they into their being, their source, their light, whatever you want to call it? I just thought they must be in a really bad space to be able to do that to another person. And the forgiveness just allowed me to let go of all the hurt, all the anger, all the rage, and it just brought in peace. and life is just much easier.
Oh, that's great. And I guess on a daily basis, do you have affirmations? Do you use things to continually keep you in a positive place? Is there anything you do? Or
I don't really, but I think, it sounds maybe quite dramatic, but when your life is nearly taken away from you, it's now made me so grateful to be alive. I realize so many women and men are raped and then murdered, and I was so close to it that night that I just think they've actually taught me to really appreciate life. They've showed me that there's so much more going on, and one of them really stopped the worst one from killing me at the very end. So I have to be grateful towards him as well, but to really see what I have in life, I just think life is for living. I love my life.
Oh, yeah, no, that's brilliant. That, obviously in a situation that is so bad that you can turn it around and take the positives out of it. So that's a really good message.
Well, I saw that I really had a choice, that I could really accept all that was done to me and learn to let it go, or I could stay caught in my hatred and my anger and my revenge. And I thought, well, I struggled so long to have children. What would be the point of bringing them into this world if I just then projected all my anger and fear onto them? So I just thought, for them, for me, for my husband, the two young men would have no idea if I held on to all this anger. It was only poisoning me. So I just thought really that it's not what happens to us that is important, it's what we do with what happens to us. And if we choose to, we can learn to get past anything in life.
That's a great message to share. We're coming near the end of the story, but it's a positive place you're in now, and that's brilliant. What does the future hold? What is, on the horizon for you? Where's the next step of your journey?
You know what? I've never really planned any of it so far. So
okay.
All the talks, all the stuff that I've done, people just approach me and come to me. So I'm very much just allowing myself just to be exactly where I'm meant to be. I just trust life will be guiding me and leading me. And so far it's done a pretty good job.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'm delighted that it led you to this conversation with me. I normally end with a couple of questions around just kind of rapid fire enough ones. But one is I love asking my guests about a book that they would recommend. And obviously Unbroken is certainly one that we would be
obviously
recommending.
We would recommend that one, yes.
Well, that's a given. And I will definitely put links to that in the notes on the show at the end on the website. Is there any other book or anything you've kind of consumed that has really been impactful to you in your own journey?
There's been a few books. One book that I always loved as a child, and I've read it again many times as an adult, is The Diary of Anne Frank. Because whatever she went through, she still had the ability to see the good in people, and that always stayed with me. And another one that always had a huge impact on me was Maya Angelou. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, because I didn't know then that people could write or talk about childhood rape. I didn't know that that was possible. And she also just gave me so much hope and courage. And, just really, I've never forgotten that book.
Wow. Okay, that's great to get a couple there. The second one I heard of Maya Angelou, I didn't know the book, but
Yes, there's about 5 books in her memoir and her biographies. And my book starts with a quote by her. I'm very influenced by her, and it says that whilst I may be changed by what happens to me, I refuse to be reduced by it. And I've always just loved that.
Wow. Yeah, brilliant. I'll certainly include that in the notes as well. I like asking people that I talk with advice. Is there a piece of advice that has stood out with you, or a piece that you like to pass forward? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I would just say to people out there, if they've ever experienced any rape, sexual harassment, abuse, that it's never ever too late to find your voice. It's never too late to go and get help. To keep that shame inside is only going to hurt you, and it's the thing you can do that will really help is to give it oxygen, to release that shame by speaking about it, to find someone that you trust. It will be so beneficial to really be listened to be heard and to be believed. There's nothing more powerful.
No, it's a great way to end it, and I hope through your story that people that listen certainly take something very positive away from it. And yeah, if they feel there's something buried in themselves that they wanted to share, it'd be brilliant if this helped them do that, for sure. So Madeleine, thanks so much. Just before we wrap up, how can people connect in with you or follow you or learn more about you?
Yes, I am on all over the place. So I have a website, madelineblack.co.uk. I'm on Twitter, which is madblack65, on Instagram, which is also madblack65, on LinkedIn, Madeleine Black, and on Facebook I have a public page, which is Madeleine Black Unbroken.
Okay, I will promise to put all those links in there as well, so people can find it easier. And look, that's been really, really excellent for you to come on and share the story. I really appreciate it, and
you're very welcome.
I certainly have enjoyed listening to it. Listening is so important, and taking stuff from that can only be of benefit. So thanks so much, and best of luck on your trip to Cork. I know you're going to be here. Obviously by the time I put this out it'll have passed, but
yes.
That's still great to have you over, and definitely please do keep in touch, and have a great rest of weekend, Madeleine.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. How was that? Did you enjoy it? I hope so. If you did, please like, share, and do all that other good stuff that only takes a second on social media but means an awful lot to me as it spreads the reach. You can get the details from the show in the show notes on the website robofthegreen.ie. In there you can share the show out with others. I really just want to touch on 3 other quick things. 1, feedback. I learned so much from it. Without it, I can't improve. Please give me a bit of feedback, positive, negative, constructive. Would you recommend a book? Do you have any other ideas for guests? How about more video? Let me know what you want and I can make it happen. I will try. That's number 1. Number 2, sharing is caring. This year I'm making more of an effort to try and expand the reach. Facebook, there's a page and there's a group. The 1% Better community on Facebook is where I really hope new listeners go to, share ideas, comments, in general things that they could help others with. That's what it's there for. Follow me on Spreaker.com, that's the new host. I'm on Twitter, growing not exponentially at all, but slowly, so please follow there. I'm on Instagram, all of these are at Rob of the Green. LinkedIn, Rob O'Donoghue. Get in touch, would love to hear from you. Number 3 is about support. So I'm offering a few hours a month, pro bono, free coaching to those that can't afford it, that need some coaching, that want some coaching. If you go to the website, the support page, click on the pro bono link. On the flip side of that, where you guys can support me, go to patreon.com, the Rob of the Green page. You can make a donation there. You can get access to exclusive content, which I'm adding all the time. That would be awesome. Anything you contribute will go back into the show to make it better, make it more than 1% better. Also, there's the option to buy one of those books that were recommended through the website, which will bring you to Amazon, which will get you the normal links, which will get you the books at the normal price, but supposedly Amazon will give the show a small donation every time a book is purchased, or anything for that matter, which is great. So finally, I just wanted to say thanks so much for listening. I know it's difficult to make improvements, to push things forward, to get outside your comfort zone. I'm trying to do it all the time. I hope that every listen and every show and every guest that is on gives you something to take away that you could apply, adopt and adapt into your own life to create a new habit, to make something better. Don't overreach. Small improvements, 1% is enough. And thank yourself for making the time to listen to the show. It shows you're interested in learning, improving, and getting better, even if it's just 1% at a time. Have a great day and good luck.